Here we are at the site of the most important battle in Scottish history, Bannockburn. Scotland is about to face another electoral battle that we really weren't expecting.
The idea that 3 years after voting to leave the EU, the people of this country should be asked to elect a new set of MEPs is, I believe, unacceptable.
It's regrettably not going to be possible to finish that process before the date that's legally due for the European parliamentary election.
On the 23rd of May, against all the odds, we'll be electing 6 Scottish members to the European Parliament. And now that this election is happening, we must take full advantage of it to change the narrative on independence.
If we are removed against our will, independence will be our only route back. Chers collègues, I'm not asking you to solve our domestic discussions. I am asking you to leave a light on so that we can find our way home. Thank you.
Think back to what happened 2 years ago at the Westminster general election. The SNP defeated the Conservatives with a bit to spare. But because the SNP were starting from an exceptionally high base and the Tories were starting from an exceptionally low base, the media were able to present Ruth Davidson's loss as a triumph, one that proved there was no public appetite for an independence referendum.
12 Scottish seats shoring up a troubled party down south. And there was Scottish independence, the issue that turned on its axis overnight.
The opposite could happen in the Euro vote because this time the SNP are starting from a relatively low base. 5 years ago they took 29% of the vote and only 2 of the 6 seats, the same as Labour. And although the Tories only took 1 seat, opinion polls suggest that Ruth Davidson has suddenly lost a huge chunk of her support to the new Brexit party. This could be a perfect storm for opponents of independence. The SNP have plenty of scope to make gains, while the most hardline unionist party looks set to either stand still or be wiped out completely. It would be hard for the media to portray that as anything other than a big step towards an independence referendum.
It is time. It is time for Scotland to become independent.
But we have to actually make it happen. Opinion polls suggest that the SNP should win at least 3 seats. But the polls were saying much the same thing in 2009 and in 2014. In both of those years, the SNP polled significantly lower than expected and ended up falling just short of what would have been required to snatch a 3rd seat. If history repeats itself this year, the momentum behind the independence campaign could be stalled. So what do we need to do? Luckily, the voting system for Euro elections couldn't be simpler. This is the only type of election in which every vote in Scotland is equal. There are no constituency boundaries, no marginal seats, and absolutely no preferential voting. Each of us will cast just 1 vote for 1 party. The votes across Scotland will be counted, and then the seats distributed in rough proportion to the share of the vote each party receives. But because it's not possible to get a truly proportional result with only 6 seats available, a great deal depends on the exact mathematical formula used to allocate seats. In Scotland, and in the rest of the UK, the D'Hondt formula is used, which tends to favour larger parties. This means it could be possible for the SNP to win 4 of the 6 seats on as little as 40% of the vote. The reward for gaining a relatively small number of extra votes may be enormous. So there's no excuse for any of us to feel that our votes don't matter this time.
Chers collègues, do not let Scotland down now!
Let's get to the polling stations on the 23rd of May and make this the independence election.